My husband drained our joint account of $247,000 to impress his 24-year-old girlfriend, thinking he'd left me destitute. But while he was busy buying her diamonds, I was sitting in my corner office as the majority shareholder of the very bank he used. When he couldn't get approved for a mortgage with his new flame, guess whose signature was needed on the denial letter? Sometimes karma wears a designer suit and carries a fountain pen. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The day I discovered my husband's betrayal began like any other Tuesday. Morning sunlight streamed through our bedroom curtains as I reached across the California king bed only to find Daniel's side empty and cold. This wasn't unusual. He'd been working early for months now. 15 years of marriage had taught me his rhythms, but lately, they'd changed. Subtle shifts that individually meant nothing but collectively whispered that something was amiss. I stretched and reached for my phone, surprised to see a notification from our bank. Unusual activity. Alert flashed across my screen. With a frown, I tapped it open, expecting to see a mistaken charge or perhaps a duplicate payment to one of our regular vendors. What I saw instead stopped my breath mid-inhale. A transfer, $247,000 from our joint savings account to an external account I didn't recognize. The transaction had occurred at 11:43 p.m. the previous night, while I was asleep and Daniel was supposedly working late at his law firm. Most wives in this situation might have panicked. They might have called their husband immediately, demanding answers. They might have felt that sickening lurch of financial freefall, the terror of suddenly standing on the edge of financial ruin. I felt something entirely different, a cold, crystalline clarity. You see, what Daniel didn't know, what he had never bothered to ask in 15 years of marriage, was exactly who I was before we met. He knew the basic outline. I'd worked in finance, had an MBA from Wharton, had family money that allowed me to step back from the corporate world when we married. He liked that I was intelligent, but had been perfectly content when I decided to take a supporting role in his career instead of pursuing my own. What he didn't know was that my family money came from being a third-generation banker, that my grandfather had founded Meridian Trust Bank, which through a series of mergers had become Atlantic Meridian Financial, that while I no longer maintained a public-facing role, I remained the single largest shareholder and sat on the board of directors, the very bank where Daniel had just emptied our savings account. I set my phone down and took a deep breath. Then another. I walked to our expansive closet and selected a charcoal Armani suit I rarely wore anymore, paired with Louboutin pumps and pearl earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated from business school. Today requires armor, I whispered to myself as I applied my makeup with meticulous precision. I didn't call Daniel. Instead, I called Elise, my executive assistant at the bank, a position that technically shouldn't exist since I wasn't an active executive, but the board had insisted I maintain an office and staff. Elise, I need you to clear my calendar for the next 2 days and prepare the executive suite. I'm coming in. Her surprise was evident but professional. Of course, Ms. Harrington. Anything specific I should prepare? I hadn't used my maiden name professionally in years. It felt both foreign and familiar. I need complete access to account records for Daniel Chen. And Elise? Complete discretion on this matter. Not even Marcus should know I'm looking into this. Marcus Delaney was the current CEO, a position he'd earned through merit, though some whispered he'd gotten it by marrying the founder's granddaughter. Those whispers underestimated us both. Understood. Will there be anything else? I thought of the home Daniel and I had built together. The dinner parties we'd hosted for his colleagues, where I'd played the role of supportive wife. The dreams we'd shared on lazy Sunday mornings about the family we'd start someday, when his career allowed for it. Yes, I said finally. Contact. Claire Bennett at Bennett Legal. Tell her I need to see her today. Claire was the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city. She was also my former college roommate. As I drove my rarely used Tesla to the bank's downtown headquarters, I tried to piece together when things had started to change. Daniel and I had met at a charity gala 15 years ago. I'd been 29, already established in my banking career, but growing restless with the predetermined path my family had set out for me. He'd been 31, ambitious and charismatic, a rising star at his law firm specializing in corporate acquisitions. He'd approached me at the bar, mistaking me for a caterer in my simple black dress. When I corrected him, he'd been embarrassed, but recovered with a self-deprecating joke about needing his vision checked. I'd found his humility refreshing in a room full of people hyper-aware of status and connection. Our courtship had been whirlwind and passionate. Within 6 months, we were engaged. By our first anniversary, we were married. I'd chosen to step back from active banking management, though I'd maintained my board position and ownership stake, at my grandfather's insistence. "Never give up your power completely, Evangeline," he'd warned me the night before my wedding. "Not even for love." I'd nodded dutifully, but hadn't truly understood. At 30, I'd been eager to escape the weight of the Harrington legacy, to be simply Evangeline Chen, to create something that felt entirely my own. For a while, it had been wonderful. I'd renovated our home, thrown myself into charity work, supported Daniel through the grueling process of becoming partner at his firm. When had that changed? When had his late nights become more frequent? When had the light in his eyes when he looked at me begun to dim? The security guard at Atlantic Meridian's executive entrance did a double take when I approached. The last time I'd used this entrance had been for the annual shareholder meeting 6 months ago. "Ms. Harrington, good morning," he fumbled with his tablet. "You're not on today's schedule." "It's an unplanned visit, Richard," I said, recognizing him from my more active days. "But you can verify my access." He tapped a few buttons, then nodded. "Of course, Ms. Harrington. Welcome back." The executive elevator whisked me to the 47th floor. When the doors opened, Elise was waiting, her expression professionally neutral despite the unusual circumstances. "Everything is prepared in your office," she said, falling into step beside me. "The records you requested are accessible on your secure terminal. Ms. Bennett will be here at 11. Would you like coffee?" "Please," I said, striding down the hallway past curious glances from executives who recognized me but rarely saw me in the building. My office remained exactly as I'd left it after my last visit, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Family photos dotted the credenza: my grandfather in front of the original Meridian Trust building, my parents at the opening of the 100th branch, me at my MBA graduation with my grandmother. No photos of Daniel. I'd always kept my marriage separate from my banking legacy. I settled behind my desk and logged into the secure terminal. As majority shareholder, I had access privileges that bypassed even the CEO's authority, a failsafe my grandfather had insisted upon when we restructured the bank years ago. Within minutes, I had Daniel's complete financial history displayed before me. Our joint accounts, his personal accounts, credit cards, investment portfolio, everything. The picture that emerged confirmed my suspicions and revealed details I hadn't anticipated. The $247,000 transfer had gone to a recently opened account belonging to Sophia Reynolds, age 24, paralegal at Daniel's firm. But that wasn't all. For the past 8 months, Daniel had been systematically moving money, smaller amounts that wouldn't trigger alerts, into a separate account. Designer purchases, hotel charges, restaurant bills at places we'd never visited. Together. A pattern of deception meticulously documented in the cold language of transaction records. I was still reviewing the data when Elise announced Claire's arrival. My old friend entered, impeccably dressed in a navy suit that screamed both authority and expense. Her expression softened when she saw me. "Evie," she said, using my college nickname. "It's been too long." I wish it were under better circumstances, I replied, gesturing for her to sit. She placed her briefcase on my desk. Elise mentioned you needed legal counsel but didn't provide details. Is this about the bank? It's about my marriage, I said, turning the monitor so she could see Daniel's transaction history. I need to understand my options. Claire's eyes narrowed as she scanned the screen, her expression hardening with each scroll. Classic pattern, she muttered. He's been planning this for months. She looked up at me. Do you have a prenuptial agreement? Basic one. Protection for inherited assets and family businesses. Standard infidelity clause. She nodded. Which this clearly violates. Have you confronted him? Not yet. I wanted to understand the full picture first. As Claire began outlining legal strategies, my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. A lie so casual it had become routine. What do you want out of this, Evie? Claire asked, drawing my attention back. Quick and quiet settlement? Public exposure? Maximum financial penalty? The question gave me pause. What did I want? 15 years of marriage didn't evaporate in a morning, even faced with irrefutable evidence of betrayal. Part of me still loved the man I thought Daniel had been. I began, then stopped, considering my words carefully. I want what my grandmother always told me to maintain, options and leverage. Claire smiled, a predatory expression I remembered well from our college debates. Then let's create those for you. For the next hour, we developed a strategy that would protect my assets while giving me time to decide my next move. No immediate confrontation, no emotional reactions that might alert Daniel to my discovery. Instead, careful documentation and strategic positioning. And Evie, Claire said, as our meeting concluded, remember that you're not just a wronged wife. You're Evangeline Harrington, third-generation banker and major shareholder of Atlantic Meridian Financial. You have power he can't begin to comprehend. After Claire left, I remained in my office, watching the city below as afternoon shadows lengthened across the streets. People scurried about their days, unaware that high above them, my life was imploding and reforming into something new. My phone buzzed again, an email notification from our home security system showing Daniel entering our house with a woman. Sophia Reynolds, I presumed. They were laughing as they entered, his hand possessively on the small of her back. He led her upstairs to our bedroom. Our bedroom. I closed the email and looked out at the city again. Then I picked up my desk phone and dialed an extension I knew by heart. Marcus? It's Evangeline. I think it's time I took a more active role at the bank again. There was a pause then. About damn time, Evie. Board meets tomorrow at 9. I expect you'll want to address them? Yes, I said, a plan crystallizing in my mind. I'll have some proposals to discuss. And Marcus, I'll need complete autonomy on certain special projects. You've always had it, he replied. This is still your bank, my legacy, my power. I opened my desk drawer and removed a small velvet box containing my grandmother's signet ring, which I hadn't worn since my wedding day. The Harrington crest gleamed in the afternoon light as I slid it onto my right hand. Daniel had emptied our savings to fund his fantasy with a woman 15 years my junior. He thought he'd left me financially vulnerable, perhaps even desperate. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. Sometimes the most devastating power is the kind that remains hidden until exactly the right moment. And my moment was just beginning. When I finally left the office that evening, I didn't go home to the house I shared with Daniel. Instead, I checked into the presidential suite at the Archer, a luxury hotel owned by one of the bank's subsidiary companies. I needed neutral territory to plan my next moves. As I sipped a glass of Macallan 25, my grandfather's favorite, I gazed at the city lights and felt something unexpected beneath my pain and anger. Gratitude. Gratitude that I had maintained my separate identity even while building a life with Daniel. Gratitude for my grandfather's insistence that I never fully relinquish my power. "You never know when you'll need to stand on your own 2 feet," he'd told me. "Make sure they're always planted on solid ground." My phone buzzed with another text from Daniel. "Miss you. Get some rest. Big case preparation keeping me at the office tonight." I didn't reply. Tomorrow would be soon enough to begin the next chapter of my story. Not as a victim of betrayal, but as a woman reclaiming her full power. Sometimes we need to lose what we thought we wanted to find what we truly deserve. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morning. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my hotel suite, painting the room in hues of gold and amber. I'd slept surprisingly well, the kind of deep, dreamless sleep that comes after making a life-altering decision. The path forward wasn't entirely clear, but the first step was reclaim what was mine. Not just my money or my marriage, but my identity. I dressed with deliberate care in a midnight blue Stella McCartney suit I'd packed in my emergency go bag, another of my grandfather's lessons. Always be prepared to walk away from any situation, he'd taught me. The bag contained 3 days' worth of clothes, basic toiletries, copies of essential documents, and $10,000 in cash. I'd maintained it throughout my marriage, updating it seasonally, a habit Daniel had teased me about on the rare occasions he'd noticed. "Planning a quick getaway?" he'd ask with a bemused smile. "Just being prepared," I'd always answer, never explaining exactly what I was preparing for. By 8:30 a.m., I was entering the bank's executive boardroom, drawing curious glances from board members who rarely saw me at meetings beyond the obligatory quarterly appearances. Marcus Delaney, the CEO and my hand-selected successor when I'd stepped back from active management, raised an eyebrow but nodded respectfully. "Evangeline?" He greeted me, using my full name in this professional context. "Wonderful to have you joining us today." The other board members, mostly men in their 50s and 60s who had worked with my grandfather or father, murmured similar sentiments with varying degrees of sincerity. The newer members, those who had joined after my semi-retirement, looked more openly surprised. "Thank you, Marcus," I replied, taking my designated seat at the table, a seat that had remained symbolically empty during my absence. I believe it's time I took a more active role again. The meeting proceeded through its standard agenda: quarterly earnings reports, risk assessments, strategic initiatives. I listened attentively, asking occasional pointed questions that made it clear I'd been keeping up with the bank's operations despite my absence from these meetings. With each question, I could see the board members recalibrating their perception of me. No longer the founder's granddaughter who had retreated into domestic life, but a sharp financial mind reclaiming her place at the table. When the regular agenda concluded, Marcus turned to me. "Evangeline has indicated she has some proposals to discuss. The floor is yours, Evie." I stood, smoothing my suit jacket, a gesture my grandmother had taught me to establish command of a room. "Thank you, Marcus. Gentlemen, as you know, while I've maintained a less visible role in recent years, my commitment to Atlantic Meridian's success has never wavered. Today, I'd like to propose 2 initiatives." I activated the presentation screen, displaying the first slide I'd prepared in my hotel room the previous evening. First, I believe we need to modernize our approach to high-net-worth clients experiencing major life transitions, particularly divorce. A slight stir around the table. This wasn't a traditional banking priority. Our research indicates that 71% of women change financial institutions within 1 year of divorce. Yet these clients represent a significant growth opportunity, particularly as women increasingly control greater portions of global wealth. I advanced to the next slide, showing projected revenue figures that I knew would capture their attention. I'm proposing a specialized division focused on life transition banking, divorce, widowhood, career changes, business exits. This division would provide tailored financial planning, asset protection strategies, and personalized support during these critical junctures. Harold Winters, one of the more traditional board members, frowned. This sounds more like wealth management than banking. We're not a therapy service, Evangeline. I'd anticipated this reaction. This isn't about therapy, Harold. It's about retention and growth. When clients experience major life transitions, they're at high risk of moving their assets elsewhere. By providing specialized services during these periods, we not only retain those assets, but often increase them as clients consolidate finances. I moved to my next slide, showing competitor analysis. JP Morgan and Goldman have already launched similar initiatives. We have an opportunity to establish ourselves as leaders in this space, particularly given our strong regional presence. The discussion continued for 20 minutes, with most board members gradually warming to the concept as I addressed concerns and highlighted potential returns. Finally, Marcus called for a vote, and the initiative passed with only Harold and one other member opposing. Excellent, I said, moving to my second proposal. Additionally, I'd like to establish a special audit committee focused on identity protection and fraudulent fund transfers, with particular attention to domestic financial abuse. This drew more quizzical looks. Recent cases have highlighted vulnerabilities in our systems, I continued smoothly. While our security protocols are robust for detecting external fraud, we need more sophisticated algorithms for identifying patterns of domestic financial abuse or unauthorized transfers between parties with previously established relationships. I didn't mention the $247,000 transfer from my joint account with Daniel. I didn't need to. This wasn't about my personal situation. It was about creating structural changes that would benefit countless others while simultaneously giving me the institutional tools I needed for my own situation. I'd like to chair this committee, I added, working directly with risk management and compliance. This proposal generated more debate with concerns about resource allocation and regulatory implications. But my preparation was thorough, and eventually this initiative too was approved. As the meeting concluded, Marcus approached me. Impressive presentation, though I can't help wondering what prompted this sudden re-engagement. His eyes held a question he was too diplomatic to ask directly. Marcus knew me well enough to sense something had changed. Let's just say I've been reminded of the importance of maintaining control of one's own financial destiny, I replied. Would you have dinner with me tonight? There are some additional matters I'd like to discuss privately. Of course, he agreed. Hudson's at 8? Hudson's was an exclusive restaurant where the bank often entertained major clients, private, discreet, and perfectly suited for sensitive discussions. Perfect. And Marcus? I'll need complete account documentation for transfers exceeding $100,000, from joint accounts to new single-holder accounts over the past year. For the audit committee, I added. His expression remained neutral, but I could see understanding dawn in his eyes. Marcus hadn't become CEO without developing exceptional emotional intelligence. I'll have those ready for dinner, he said simply. I spent the afternoon in my rarely used office, reconnecting with key department heads and reviewing operational changes implemented during my absence. With each conversation, I felt myself stepping more fully back into my professional identity, an identity I had never completely abandoned, but had certainly allowed to recede into the background. At 4:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Coming home for dinner tonight. Special surprise for you. 7 kauham. I stared at the message, wondering what surprise he might have planned. Perhaps guilt had finally penetrated his consciousness? Or maybe he needed to create a plausible backstory for the missing $247,000. Won't be home tonight, I replied after careful consideration. Working late and then meeting an old friend for dinner. The response came almost immediately. Working? On what? The question revealed so much about how Daniel had come to see me, not as a professional with her own career and pursuits, but as someone whose activities needed explanation if they deviated from his expectations. Foundation planning, I answered vaguely, referring to the charitable foundation I chaired, one of the few professional activities Daniel acknowledged in my life. Don't wait up. I set the phone aside and returned to the financial reports on my desk. By 7:30, I was walking into Hudson's, where Marcus was already waiting in a private dining room. You look more like yourself today, he observed as I took my seat. The banking world suits you better than charity luncheons. I smiled at his directness. Who says I can't do both? No one who knows you well, he countered, pouring wine into my glass. Which is why I've been wondering for years when you'd step back in fully. The waiter appeared to take our orders, and once we were alone again, Marcus slid a USB drive across the table. The account information you requested. 37 transfers meeting your criteria in the past year. 4. Involving your accounts. I wasn't surprised Marcus had identified my personal connection to the data. There was a reason I'd selected him as my successor when I'd stepped back. Thank you, I said, pocketing the drive. And thank you for not asking. Would you answer? If I did, he countered. I considered this as I sipped my wine. Yes, but I'd prefer to handle certain aspects privately before involving the bank officially. Understood. He leaned back slightly. Just remember that the bank has resources that might be useful whenever you're ready. Our conversation shifted to bank business throughout dinner, but as dessert arrived, Marcus returned to personal matters. Evie, forgive me for speaking plainly, but I've known you for 15 years. I was there when you made the decision to step back. I respected it, even when I didn't fully agree with it. But, I prompted, knowing there was more. But I've watched you dim your light year by year. The Evangeline Harrington I first met was brilliant, ambitious, and uncompromising. Somewhere along the way, that changed. Today in the boardroom, I saw glimpses of her again. His words struck a chord more painful than I'd expected. Had I truly dimmed my light? The metaphor was apt. Not an extinguishing, but a gradual lowering of intensity, until what remained was a mere suggestion of the original brightness. Life is about choices, I said finally. 15 years ago, I chose to prioritize my marriage over my banking career. And now? He pressed gently. Now I'm reassessing that choice. Marcus nodded, accepting my answer without pushing further. Whatever you decide, the bank will support you. I will support you. I appreciate that, I said sincerely. When I returned to my hotel suite that evening, I found a bouquet of red. Roses waiting, Daniel's signature gesture whenever he disappointed me or needed to smooth over a conflict. The card read, "Missed you tonight. Rain check on the surprise? Love, D." I placed the roses in the bathroom sink without adding water. They would wilt by morning, a fitting metaphor for my marriage. Before preparing for bed, I inserted the USB drive Marcus had given me into my laptop and began reviewing the data. The 4 transfers from our accounts told a clear story, increasing amounts over 8 months, culminating in the $247,000 transfer to Sophia Reynolds. But what caught my attention was the pattern of other transfers flagged in the system. Similar scenarios played out across multiple accounts. Joint savings depleted, retirement funds mysteriously transferred, equity lines maxed out. Behind each transaction was likely a story similar to mine: betrayal, deception, financial infidelity. The difference was that I had the power to protect myself. Many others didn't. I thought of the initiatives I'd proposed that morning. They weren't merely strategic moves in my personal chess game. They represented systemic changes that could protect others facing similar situations. This realization crystallized something important. My response to Daniel's betrayal shouldn't be just about personal revenge or self-protection. It could be about creating meaningful change. My grandmother had often said, banking isn't just about money. It's about power. Who has it, who doesn't, and what responsibilities come with it. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. Tomorrow, I would need to decide my next move with Daniel. Confront him immediately? Continue gathering evidence? Play the unsuspecting wife while implementing my strategy? My phone buzzed with a text. Not from Daniel this time, but from Claire Bennett. Document everything. Don't confront until we're ready. Remember, strategic patience. She was right. Of course. Emotional confrontations might be momentarily satisfying, but rarely strategic. And strategy was what I needed now. I picked up my grandmother's signet ring from the nightstand, turning it over in my fingers. The Harrington family motto was engraved inside the band, Fortuna fave praeparatis, fortune favors the prepared. My grandfather had built Meridian Trust from a single branch to a regional powerhouse by adhering to this principle. My father had expanded it nationally using the same approach. Now I would apply it to my personal life. Daniel thought he'd secured his future by draining our savings. He believed the narrative he'd constructed about me, that I was merely his supportive wife, financially dependent and professionally dormant. That narrative was about to be rewritten. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling its familiar weight. The young banker who had set aside her ambitions for marriage was gone. In her place stood a woman reclaiming her power, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect. Tomorrow would be about preparation. The day after, execution. I fell asleep. Planning, not my revenge but my renaissance. Morning brought a flurry of texts from Daniel, each more concerned than the last as my absence from home extended. Where did you sleep last night? Are you okay? Getting worried. Please call me. Important matters to discuss. I responded only to the last, very busy today. We'll call this evening. His reply came quickly. Evie, it's important, about our finances. So he'd noticed my access to the bank records, or perhaps he was simply preparing to explain the missing money. Either way, I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Tonight, I texted back. 7 p.m. At the bank, I immersed myself in establishing my new initiatives. By noon, I had assembled a preliminary team for the Life Transitions Banking Division and scheduled meetings with compliance and risk management for the Special Audit Committee. During lunch, brought to my office to avoid interruptions, I called Claire for a legal update. I've documented the transfers and prepared initial divorce filings, she reported, but I'm not filing them yet, just having everything ready when you give the word. What about the infidelity clause in our prenup? I asked. Rock solid. His activities with Ms. Reynolds clearly constitute infidelity. Between the hotel receipts, the transfers, and the home security footage, we have irrefutable evidence. And financially? The prenup protects your Atlantic Meridian shares and other inherited assets completely. For assets acquired during marriage, standard equitable distribution would apply. But the infidelity clause includes a penalty provision that significantly reduces his share. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. What's our timeline? That depends on your goals, Evie. Quick and clean, 3 to 6 months. If he contests, potentially a year or longer, though I don't see what grounds he'd have. He won't contest, I said with certainty. Daniel values his professional reputation too highly. A messy public divorce would damage his standing at the firm. Then we prepare everything, confront him with the evidence, and present the settlement agreement. Clean, controlled, and on your terms. Perfect. After hanging up, I turned my attention to a more immediate concern: where I would live. While, legally, I had every right to return to our home, the thought of sleeping in the bedroom where Daniel had brought Sophia was intolerable. By mid-afternoon, I had contacted a real estate agent who specialized in executive properties and arranged to view several options that evening. I also scheduled movers for the following day to retrieve essential items from the house during business hours when Daniel would be at his office. At 4:30, I received an unexpected visitor, Marcus, holding a thick file folder. "I thought you might find this useful," he said, placing it on my desk. "It's the complete documentation on a similar case from 3 years ago. Different circumstances, but potentially relevant precedents." I opened the folder to find a case study of financial fraud between spouses, complete with the bank's response and legal outcomes. "This is extremely helpful," I said, genuinely touched by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." "Just doing my job," he replied with a small smile. "The bank protects its own." After he left, I remained at my desk, contemplating his words. The bank protects its own. It was a philosophy my grandfather had instilled in the corporate culture, not as nepotism, but as a commitment to supporting employees and stakeholders through challenges. For years, I had distanced myself from that identity, preferring to be seen primarily as Daniel's wife rather than a Harrington banker. That choice had left me vulnerable in ways I hadn't anticipated. Never again. At precisely 7 p.m., I called Daniel from my hotel suite, where I'd returned after viewing 3 potential apartments. I'd selected a sleek penthouse in a building owned by a bank subsidiary, a connection that ensured both security and discretion. "Evie, finally," Daniel answered on the first ring. "Where are you? I've been worried sick." His concern sounded genuine, which only emphasized the depth of his duplicity. How easily he shifted between personas. The worried husband on the phone with me, the passionate lover with Sophia. "I'm working on a special project," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "You mentioned wanting to discuss finances?" A pause. "Yes. I noticed some irregularities in our accounts. I wanted to discuss them with you in person." "Irregularities," I repeated. "Such as the $247,000 transfer to Sophia Reynolds?" The silence stretched for several seconds, broken only by the sound of his breathing. "How did you—" He stopped, then tried again. "Evie, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I replied. "You're an excellent lawyer, after all. Constructing narratives is your specialty." "This isn't what you think," he insisted. "It's a temporary measure for a real estate investment. Sophia is a colleague who—" "Daniel," I interrupted, "let's not insult each other's intelligence. I know about the affair. I know about the hotels, the jewelry, the weekend trips. I even know about you bringing her to our home." Another long silence. "Where are you?" he asked finally, his tone shifting from defensive to calculating. "We should discuss this in person." "I don't think that's necessary right now," I answered. "I'll be sending movers to collect some of my things tomorrow. Please ensure you're not at the house between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. "Your things?" Now there was an edge of panic in his voice. "Evie, you're overreacting. We can work through this. The money is the least of my concerns," I cut in. "Though you should know that the transfer has been flagged in the bank's system. The fraud department is investigating." "Fraud?" he echoed. "It's not fraud, Evie. It's our joint account. I had every legal right to—" "Not according to the bank's preliminary assessment," I countered smoothly. "But I'm sure your lawyers can sort that out with the bank's legal team." "The bank's legal team," he repeated slowly. "Evie, what have you done?" "I've simply re-engaged with my professional responsibilities, Daniel. Something I should have done years ago." I could almost hear him piecing things together. My absence, my sudden reference to banking roles he'd long dismissed, the unexpected scrutiny of a transaction he'd believed was safely anonymous. "This isn't like you," he said finally. "You're not vindictive." "You're right," I agreed. "I'm not vindictive. I'm strategic. There's a difference. What do you want? He asked, the lawyer in him emerging as he sought to negotiate. Time and space for now, I answered. We'll discuss settlement terms when I'm ready. Settlement? His voice rose. Evie, you're my wife. 15 years can't end over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, Daniel. It was hundreds of deliberate choices over months, and it's not ending because of what you did with Sophia. It's ending because of what you did with me, what you reduced me to in your mind. What are you talking about? You saw me as an accessory to your life, financially dependent, professionally irrelevant, easily deceived. That perception was more betrayal than the affair itself. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, becoming the smooth, reasonable tone he used in difficult negotiations. I understand you're hurt and angry. You have every right to be. But let's not make permanent decisions during a temporary emotional crisis. Take your time, get some space. We can talk when you're calmer. His condescension crystallized everything wrong with our marriage. Even now, confronted with his betrayal, he viewed my reaction as an emotional overreaction rather than a rational response to his actions. Goodbye, Daniel, I said quietly. The movers will arrive at 10 a.m. I ended the call before he could respond and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I needed clarity and calm. As I gazed out at the city lights, I felt a strange sense of peace. Not the peace of resolution, but the peace that comes with alignment between who you are and how you live. For too long, I had allowed a gap to exist between my capabilities and my choices. That gap was now closing, one deliberate decision at a time. The following morning brought a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I woke before my alarm, mind already mapping out the day ahead. Moving day. The first visible, tangible step in dismantling the life I'd built with Daniel and constructing something new. I dressed in casual clothes, designer jeans, a cashmere, sweater, and comfortable flats. Attire suitable for directing movers rather than commanding boardrooms. Today wasn't about Evangeline Harrington, bank executive. It was about Evangeline Chen, soon to be Harrington again, reclaiming her personal possessions and, by extension, her personal identity. Before leaving my hotel suite, I called Claire to confirm our strategy. The movers have their instructions, she assured me. I've also arranged for a security consultant to accompany them. Former police officer, very discreet, just in case. Daniel decides to ignore your request to stay away. Thank you, I said, grateful for her thoroughness. Any updates on the financial front? I've prepared documentation for all joint accounts. Once you're ready, we can begin the process of freezing or separating them. But Evie, her voice grew serious. You should be prepared for Daniel to retaliate financially once he realizes what's happening. He already has, I reminded her. The $247,000 transfer was his first move. True, but that may have been preparation rather than retaliation. Once he understands you're several steps ahead, his approach might change. I considered this. Daniel was strategic by nature and training. His initial response might be emotional, but his legal mind would quickly assert itself. I'm not concerned about finances, I said finally. Let's focus on executing the move cleanly today. After hanging up, I headed to the penthouse I'd leased. The previous evening, a 3,000-square-foot modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows and spectacular city views. The building's management had expedited the paperwork, allowing me to take immediate occupancy. Another advantage of my banking connections. The space was empty save for the high-end appliances that came with the unit. By evening, it would contain the essential elements of my life. Clothes, personal mementos, art I'd collected before my marriage, and select pieces from our shared home that held particular meaning for me. Not furniture, though. I'd decided to furnish the space entirely. New, another symbolic break from the past. I'd already scheduled consultations with an interior designer recommended by the real estate agent. No more deferring to Daniel's preferences for dark woods and leather that had dominated our shared home. At 9:45 a.m., I arrived at the moving company's headquarters to meet the team and review the plan. The lead mover, a woman named Valerie with efficient movements and clear eyes, greeted me professionally. "Ms. Chen, we've received your inventory list and special instructions. My team understands this is a sensitive situation." "Thank you, Valerie," I replied, appreciating her directness. "Time is somewhat critical. I'd like to be completed within the scheduled window." "We'll make it happen," she assured me. "Our security consultant, Mr. Reeves, will meet us at the property." The drive to the house I'd shared with Daniel for over a decade felt surreal. I'd traversed this route thousands of times, yet today everything looked different. The familiar trees lining the street, the neighbor's meticulously maintained garden, the elegant facade of our colonial-style home all seemed to belong to a movie set of someone else's life. As we pulled into the driveway, I spotted Mr. Reeves, a fit, middle-aged man with alert eyes, waiting beside an unmarked car. No sign of Daniel's vehicle, which was a relief. "Ms. Chen," Reeves greeted me with a firm handshake. "I've done a perimeter check. The property appears secure. No one is inside according to your security system." I nodded, appreciating his thoroughness. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Shall we proceed?" Unlocking the front door felt oddly intrusive, as though I were entering a stranger's home rather than the space where I'd lived for years. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it 2 days ago: immaculate, tasteful, and utterly impersonal. Our home had always resembled a high-end furniture showroom more than a lived-in space, a realization that struck me as I surveyed the formal living room. Where were the signs of life? The books left open, the throw blankets casually draped, the mismatched pillows? Everything matched too perfectly, every surface too deliberately arranged. It was a home designed to impress visitors rather than comfort its inhabitants. I pushed the thought aside and focused on the task at hand, directing Valerie and her team to begin with my closet and personal items. Mr. Reeves positioned himself near the front entrance, maintaining vigilance while remaining unobtrusive. In my home office, I carefully packed the mementos that mattered most: photos of my parents and grandparents, academic awards from my school years, the first dollar bill framed from my grandfather's original bank. I lingered over a photo of Daniel and me on our honeymoon in Bali, our faces sun-kissed and genuinely happy. Had we ever really been those people, or had we just been playing roles even then? I left the photo on the desk. That chapter was closing. In our bedroom, I directed the movers to pack my clothes, jewelry, and personal items while avoiding Daniel's possessions. The process was efficient but emotionally complex. Each item represented a choice: keep or leave behind, essential or replaceable. In the walk-in closet, I discovered something unexpected behind a row of rarely worn formal gowns, a small safe I'd forgotten about, installed during a renovation years ago. I hesitated, trying to recall the combination. My birth date? No, we had agreed never to use birthdays for security. Our anniversary? Possibly, but it felt wrong somehow. Then I remembered the date Meridian Trust had been founded by my grandfather. Daniel had suggested it, ironically enough, as a date that would always be significant to your family. The safe opened smoothly, revealing documents I'd stored there years ago. My original birth certificate, passport from before our marriage, the deed to a small mountain cabin my grandparents had left me. Beneath these papers lay a velvet jewelry box containing my grandmother's diamond earrings, pieces I'd stopped wearing because Daniel had once commented they looked dated. I slipped the earrings into my pocket and added the documents to my packing. By noon, the movers had efficiently boxed my clothing, personal items, and the artwork I designated. As they began loading the truck, I did a final walkthrough of the house, ensuring I hadn't overlooked anything essential. In Daniel's home office, I paused. I had no intention of taking anything that wasn't legitimately mine, but I was curious whether there might be additional evidence of his deception. The room was meticulously organized as always, law books arranged by topic and jurisdiction, case files neatly labeled, desktop clear except for a fountain pen stand and legal pad. I was about to leave when I noticed something out of place. A small jewelry box partially hidden beneath a stack of case files. My heart quickened as I lifted the files to reveal a black velvet box from Cartier. Inside was an elegant diamond pendant, accompanied by a handwritten note. For my Sophia, to celebrate our new beginning. Love, D. The new beginning they were planning to finance with my money. I replaced the box exactly as I'd found it and left the room, a cold clarity settling over me. Any lingering doubts about my decision evaporated. This wasn't a momentary indiscretion or midlife crisis on Daniel's part. It was a calculated exit strategy. As the movers finished loading the truck, my phone rang. Daniel. I declined the call and texted instead, still with the movers. We'll call later. His response came immediately. I'm coming home now. We need to talk. I showed the message to Mr. Reeves, who nodded grimly. We're nearly finished. If you'd prefer to avoid a confrontation, we should expedite the last items. Agreed, I said, then turned to Valerie. How much longer? 10 minutes to secure the final artwork, then we're done, she replied efficiently. I made a quick decision. I'll leave now with Mr. Reeves. Please complete the loading and meet us at the new address. As we pulled away from the house, I glanced in the side mirror to see Daniel's Audi turning onto our street. Perfect timing. Would you like me to circle back? Mr. Reeves asked, noticing my attention to the mirror. In case there's a problem with the movers? I considered the offer briefly but shook my head. No need. Valerie seems quite capable, and Daniel won't create a scene with witnesses present. He's too concerned with appearances. The drive to my new penthouse was silent, my mind processing the morning's events. By the time we arrived, I had made several decisions that would accelerate my plans. The movers arrived 30 minutes later, and I directed the placement of my belongings in the empty space. Without furniture, the boxes and artwork created an odd juxtaposition against the sleek bare rooms, physical manifestations of a life in transition. After the movers departed, I called Claire from my new kitchen, leaning against the pristine quartz countertop. It's done, I told her, and I'd like to accelerate our timeline. What happened? She asked immediately, sensing the shift in my resolve. I described finding the Cartier pendant and note. This isn't just an affair, Claire. It's a planned exit. He's been preparing to leave while systematically draining our joint resources. The classic discard phase, she agreed. Unfortunately, I've seen this pattern before. What's your preferred timeline now? I want the divorce filing prepared by end of week, but before we file, I need to secure my financial position completely. Already in progress, she assured me. The bank connection gives us significant advantages there. After ending the call, I reached out to Marcus, requesting an urgent meeting for the following morning. Then I contacted the interior designer, moving our consultation from the end of the week to that afternoon. If I was reconstructing my life, I wanted to move quickly on all fronts. By 4 p.m., I was reviewing furniture selections and floor plans with Alessandra, the designer who had arrived with remarkable efficiency, digital portfolio in hand. The space has excellent bones, she observed, surveying the empty rooms. What direction would you like to take it? I considered the question. For 15 years, I had deferred to Daniel's aesthetic preferences, traditional, masculine, conventional. Our home had reflected his personality, not mine. Clean lines, but warm, I said, the vision clarifying as I spoke. Contemporary without being cold, art-focused, and color, I want color in my life. Alessandra nodded approvingly. I can work with that. Any specific palette preferences? I thought of my grandmother's office at the bank, the place where she had made her most important decisions, the space that had always felt most authentically hers. Blues and greens, I decided. Watercolors, with accents of copper and gold. Beautiful combination, she agreed, making notes. Timeline? As expedited as possible, I replied. Price is not the primary consideration. Her eyebrows rose slightly, but professionally, she simply nodded. I can have preliminary designs. To you tomorrow. With expedited shipping and white glove delivery, we could have the essential spaces furnished within 2 weeks. Perfect. As Alessandra prepared to leave, my phone buzzed with texts from Daniel, a barrage of messages ranging from confused to angry to conciliatory. Where are you taking these things? You can't just move out without discussing this. At least tell me where you're staying so we can talk. Evie, please. Whatever you think happened, I can explain. Is this about the money? It was for a real estate investment. I was going to surprise you. The last one made me laugh out loud. A sharp, humorless sound that echoed in the empty space. A surprise, funded by emptying our joint savings without discussion. A surprise memorialized with a diamond pendant for his girlfriend. I set the phone aside without responding and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city spread before me, lights beginning to emerge as evening descended. Somewhere, in that cityscape was the bank my grandfather had founded, the institution that had shaped my family for generations. Somewhere, too, was Daniel, probably still in our house, discovering the careful selections I had made, what to take, what to leave behind. Let him wonder, let him worry, let him begin to understand that the woman he thought he knew, compliant, accommodating, financially dependent, had never really existed. That night, I slept on a temporary mattress delivered to the penthouse, surrounded by boxes yet feeling strangely unburdened. The space was chaotic, but full of possibility, a blank canvas awaiting my design, not a compromise between two people's visions. Morning brought renewed purpose. I dressed in another power suit, emerald green, a color I'd always loved but rarely wore because Daniel preferred me in navy or black, and headed to the bank for my meeting with Marcus. He was waiting in my office, 2 cups of coffee already on the conference table along with several file folders. You look different, he observed as I set down my briefcase. The green suits you. I accepted the coffee with a nod of thanks. I'm feeling different, clearer. Good, he said simply, because we have some decisions to make. He gestured to the files. The special audit committee you established has already flagged several concerning patterns, including transactions, similar to what happened with your accounts. I opened the top file to find detailed analysis of transactions fitting the profile we'd established. Significant transfers from joint accounts to new single-holder accounts, particularly those involving age disparities between account holders. 32 incidents in the past 6 months, Marcus continued. Once we knew what to look for, the pattern became evident. I reviewed the data with growing conviction that my personal situation had revealed a significant gap in the bank's protective systems, one that affected many others. What's our regulatory obligation here? I asked. Complex, Marcus admitted. These aren't clearly fraudulent transactions in the traditional sense. Most would be classified as domestic financial disputes rather than banking fraud. But they exist in a gray area where traditional fraud detection falls short. And our ethical obligation? Marcus smiled slightly at the question. That's more straightforward, at least according to your grandfather's standards. He always said banking was about trust, not just clients trusting us, but us being worthy of that trust. I nodded, remembering my grandfather's frequent lectures on banking ethics. He had believed financial institutions had responsibilities, beyond their legal obligations, a perspective that had sometimes put him at odds with industry trends toward maximizing profits at all costs. I want to implement an alert system, I decided. When transfers fitting this pattern occur, both account holders should receive notifications, regardless of who initiated the transaction. Some clients won't appreciate the additional scrutiny, Marcus warned. Some clients are currently being financially abused without their knowledge, I countered. I'm comfortable with complaints from the former to protect the latter. He nodded. I'll have legal and compliance draft the protocol. What else? For my personal situation, I continued, I need a complete audit of all accounts connected to Daniel or his girlfriend. I also want to explore options for recovering the transferred funds. Already in progress, Marcus confirmed. Preliminary findings suggest the money went to a down payment on a property, a condo in the Westerly. The Westerly was an exclusive new development overlooking the river. Luxury units starting at over $1 million. So that was their plan. Establish a love nest using my money. Whose name is on the purchase agreement? I asked. Sophia Reynolds is the sole owner, Marcus replied. But the lender is requiring a co-signer due to her income level and credit history. The paperwork is pending. I absorbed this information, wheels turning. Let me guess. The mortgage application is with Continental Trust? Marcus nodded. One of our competitors, though not for long, if your expansion plans succeed. Continental Trust was a smaller regional bank that had been losing market share to Atlantic Meridian for years. They were rumored to be acquisition targets, something Daniel would know through his legal work with financial institutions. He's keeping the purchase away from our bank to avoid detection, I mused. Using a competitor he knows we're monitoring for potential acquisition. Precisely, Marcus agreed, though it's not as clever as he probably thinks. Standard due diligence for the acquisition would reveal the connection eventually. I tapped my fingers on the table, considering my options. What's the status of their mortgage application? Pending final approval. Their loan officer is apparently a former client of your husband's law practice. Of course. Daniel's network at work, calling in favors, leveraging connections. Find a reason to delay that approval, I instructed. Nothing obvious, just routine administrative issues. I need time to implement my response. Marcus raised an eyebrow. May I ask what you're planning? Nothing illegal or unethical, I assured him. But Daniel needs to understand that actions have consequences. And Sophia needs to learn that building a future on someone else's pain creates a very unstable foundation. He nodded, not pressing further. Consider it done. Anything else? I hesitated, then decided to broach a more personal subject. The board has been discussing expansion through acquisition for months. Continental Trust has been on our radar, but we've moved cautiously. As is appropriate for any acquisition, Marcus acknowledged. But timing matters in these situations, I continued. Continental is vulnerable now. Their last quarter showed weakening deposits and increased loan loss provisions. True, Marcus agreed. Their share price has dropped 12% since the earnings report. I think it's time to accelerate our timeline, I said decisively. Prepare an acquisition proposal for Continental. I want to present it at next week's board meeting. Marcus studied me for a moment. This is about more than just strategic banking expansion, isn't it? I met his gaze steadily. Every decision has multiple dimensions, Marcus. My grandfather taught me that. Yes, this is good business. Continental's branch network complements ours. Their wealth management division would strengthen our offerings, and the price is right. I paused, then added, if it also happens to complicate my husband's plans, that's a separate matter entirely. A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. I'll have the proposal ready by Monday. As he gathered his files to leave, he hesitated at the door. Evie, for what it's worth, I think your grandfather would be proud of how you're handling this situation. Not just the banking aspects, but the personal ones too. He always said true strength wasn't about never getting knocked down, it was about how you chose to get back up. His words stayed with me throughout the day as I immersed myself in bank operations, reconnecting with department heads and diving deeper into the business I had kept at arm's length for too long. Each conversation, each decision, felt like another brick in the foundation of my reconstructed life. By evening, I had declined 3 more calls from Daniel and received confirmation from Claire that our divorce filing was nearly complete. I also received the preliminary designs from Alessandra for my new home, spaces filled with light, color, and an energy that resonated with the person I was rediscovering. As I compared furniture options on my laptop, my phone buzzed with an email notification. From Daniel, subject line, "Please read, important." Against my better judgment, I opened it. "Evie, your silence and absence force me to communicate this. Way. I understand you're hurt and angry. You have every right to be. The bank transfer was a terrible mistake, not in intention, but in execution. I should have discussed it with you first. The truth is, I've been working on a significant real estate development opportunity that required immediate action. The investment property has already appreciated 15% since purchase. I plan to surprise you with the returns, which would more than replace the withdrawn amount. As for Sophia, she's a business associate involved in the deal. Nothing more. The rumors or suspicions you've heard are categorically false. I can prove this if you'll just meet with me. 15 years of marriage deserve more than abrupt silence. We've built a life together that shouldn't be discarded based on misunderstandings and assumptions. Please, call me, or tell me where to meet you. Let me explain everything properly. I miss you. I love you. Whatever you believe right now, those facts remain true. Daniel. I read the email twice, marveling at its calculated blend of partial admissions, outright lies, and emotional manipulation. How had I never recognized this aspect of him before? Or had I simply chosen not to see it? I closed the email, without responding, and turned back to my furniture selections, choosing a boldly patterned area rug I would never have considered in our shared home. Tomorrow would bring more decisions, more steps in my reconstruction. But tonight, in this empty space filled with boxes and possibilities, I already felt more at home than I had in years. By the 5th day of my self-imposed exile from my former life, Daniel's attempts at communication had grown increasingly desperate. Voicemails, texts, emails, each one escalating in urgency while maintaining the fiction that the money transfer had been a legitimate investment, and Sophia merely a business associate. I ignored them all, focusing instead on building my new reality. My penthouse was beginning to take shape as furniture deliveries arrived daily, each piece selected to reflect my rediscovered aesthetic. The space was becoming a physical manifestation of my internal transformation, bold yet refined, powerful yet welcoming. At the bank, I had fully reclaimed my executive role, working closely with Marcus to implement the new protective systems for joint accounts, while simultaneously preparing the acquisition proposal for Continental Trust. The rhythm of strategic banking, analyzing markets, evaluating risks, structuring deals, felt like returning to a well-loved language I had temporarily set aside. On day 6, while reviewing acquisition documents in my office, I received a call from Claire. Daniel's attorney reached out, she informed me. Thomas Blackwell, senior partner at his firm. They're requesting a meeting to discuss amicable resolution. I wasn't surprised. Daniel would naturally turn to his mentor and the firm's most seasoned divorce attorney. What do you recommend? I asked. Normally, I'd advise against any meeting until formal proceedings are underway, Claire replied. But in this case, it might be informative to hear what they're offering. It would give us insight into Daniel's strategy and how much he truly understands about your position. I considered this. Agreed, but on our terms. Your office, not his firm. and I want a forensic accountant present. I'll arrange it, Claire assured me. There's something else you should know. My investigator reports that Daniel has been spending significant time at the Westerly, the condo he purchased with Sophia. They've been seen entering and leaving together at various hours. So much for the merely a business associate claim. Has the mortgage been approved? I asked. Not yet. Apparently there are some administrative delays at Continental Trust, Claire replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. She'd connected the dots regarding my involvement there. How unfortunate for them, I remarked dryly. Indeed. One more thing. The investigator photographed Daniel moving several boxes into the condo. Based on the timing and his movements, we believe he may be gradually relocating belongings there, preparing for a more permanent arrangement. This confirmed my suspicions that Daniel had been planning his exit for months. The $247,000 transfer wasn't impulsive. It was the culmination of a calculated strategy. Thank you, Claire. Set up the meeting with Blackwell. Let's hear what they have to say. After hanging up, I gazed out my office window at the city below, thinking about the meeting ahead. What would Daniel's approach be? Continued denial? Partial admission? A pivot to financial negotiations? Whatever his strategy, I needed to be prepared for all possibilities. I pressed the intercom button. Elise, could you ask Marcus to join me when he has a moment? And contact research. I need the latest valuation. Report on the Westerly development. 20 minutes later, Marcus arrived with the requested report. The Westerly is performing well above market projections, he noted as he handed me the document. Units are selling at a 12% premium over initial offerings, with the riverfront units commanding even higher premiums. I scanned the figures. Which unit did Sophia purchase? 14003, corner unit, 14th floor, western exposure, purchase price $1, $2 million. And the down payment? $240,000, almost exactly the amount transferred from your joint account. I nodded, connecting the final dots. So Daniel liquidated our savings to secure a luxury condo for his girlfriend, with himself as the likely co-signer once the mortgage is approved. That appears to be the case, Marcus confirmed, though that approval is experiencing some unfortunate delays at Continental. His expression remained professionally neutral, but I caught the slight twinkle in his eye. How tragic, I murmured. Bureaucracy can be so frustrating. Speaking of Continental, Marcus continued, the acquisition proposal is complete. He placed another folder on my desk. The numbers work even better than initially projected. Their lending portfolio complements ours with minimal overlap, and their wealth management division would integrate seamlessly with our operations. I flipped through the document, impressed with its thoroughness. This is excellent work, Marcus. The board meeting is scheduled for Monday? 9 a.m. sharp. I've already given Harold Winters a courtesy heads up since he's been the most skeptical about expansion. Harold had been my grandfather's contemporary and remained the most conservative voice on our board. His support, or at least neutrality, would be crucial for smooth approval. Good thinking, I acknowledged. What was his response? Initially resistant, but the financial projections caught his attention. I think he'll come around once he reviews the full proposal. I nodded, satisfied with the progress. Perfect. Now, about the Special Audit Committee's findings. Have we implemented the new alert protocols for joint account transfers? System updates go live tomorrow morning, Marcus confirmed. Any transfer exceeding $10,000 from a joint account to a newly established single-holder account will trigger automated notifications to all joint account holders, regardless of who initiated the transaction. Excellent. I felt a deep satisfaction knowing that others would be protected from the situation I had experienced. This wasn't just about my personal circumstances anymore. It was about leveraging my position to create systemic protections for vulnerable clients. There's one more thing, Marcus added. Daniel called the executive suite this morning asking for you. When Elise explained you were unavailable, he mentioned being an important client of the bank and implied he might need to speak with the CEO about urgent matters. I raised an eyebrow. Did he now? And your response? Elise directed him to client services, as per standard protocol for non-executive inquiries, Marcus replied with a small smile. Apparently, he was quite insistent that his matter required executive attention. I could well imagine Daniel's frustration. He was accustomed to leveraging connections and status to get what he wanted. The realization that those tactics wouldn't work at Atlantic Meridian, my bank, would be a significant blow to his ego. If he calls again, maintain the same approach, I instructed. Any legitimate banking concerns can be handled through normal channels. Anything else is personal and should be directed to Claire Bennett. After Marcus departed, I spent the afternoon deep in acquisition planning, barely noticing as daylight faded and my office grew dark except for my desk lamp. When Elise reminded me of the time, I was surprised to discover it was already 7 p.m. You should head home, I told her. It's late. You should too, she countered with the familiarity of a longtime assistant. You've been here 12 hours. I smiled, acknowledging her point. Just wrapping up a few things. I'll leave soon. After Elise departed, I gathered my belongings and headed to the executive elevator. As the doors opened on the ground floor, I found myself face to face with Daniel. He looked terrible, his normally immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. His tailored suit was slightly rumpled, his eyes shadowed with fatigue. Evie, he said, genuine surprise in his voice. I've been trying to reach you for days. I maintained my composure, though my heart had accelerated at the unexpected encounter. Through my attorney is the appropriate channel now, Daniel. He stepped forward, preventing the elevator doors from closing. This is ridiculous. We need to talk. Just us, not through lawyers. I disagree, I replied coolly. Now, if you'll excuse me. I moved to step around him. The money was for us, he blurted, desperation evident in his tone. An investment property. The timing opportunity was critical. I couldn't wait to discuss it. I paused, curious to see how far he would take this fiction despite knowing I had access to the truth. An investment property, I repeated. In the Westerly, Unit 1403? His expression flickered, surprise, then recalculation. You've been investigating me? No, Daniel. I've been doing what I should have done years ago, paying attention. He glanced around the bank lobby, empty except for security personnel. This isn't the place to discuss personal matters. There is no appropriate place, I corrected him. Our communication should be through our respective legal representatives. Evie, please. He reached for my arm, but I stepped back. 15 years can't end like this. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, I interrupted, my voice low but firm. I know about the condo. I know about Sophia. I know about the pendant with its inscription about new beginnings. I know you've been moving your belongings. There piece by piece, so please spare me the continued lies. The color drained from his face. You were in my office, he realized. You went through my things. I observed what was in plain sight, I corrected, just as I observed the security footage of you bringing Sophia to our home, to our bedroom. His expression hardened, the facade of the repentant husband falling away. You've been spying on me? Recording me in our house? Our security system records all entries and exits. You know this. You installed it. He ran a hand through his hair, strategy visibly shifting, as he realized denial was no longer viable. Fine. Yes, Sophia and I are involved. It happened gradually. I never intended to hurt you. But our marriage hasn't been real for years, Evie. You must feel it too. We've been going through the motions, living parallel lives. I considered his words, searching for any genuine emotion beneath the self-justification. There was none, only the calculated repositioning of someone caught in a lie. Perhaps you're right about one thing, I conceded. I haven't been fully present in our marriage. I allowed myself to become a supporting character in your story rather than the protagonist of my own. That was my mistake, and I'm correcting it now. His expression flickered with hope at my partial agreement. Then let's talk about this rationally. We can work out a fair settlement without lawyers draining our resources, split our assets equitably, and move forward separately but amicably. Our resources, I repeated. You mean what remains after you transferred nearly $250,000 to your girlfriend's account? His jaw tightened. That money will be accounted for in any settlement. It was an advance, not a theft. An advance you never discussed with me. An advance that emptied our joint savings without my knowledge or consent. I knew you wouldn't approve the investment, he countered. You've always been overly conservative with finances. Sometimes opportunities require decisive action. The irony of his statement, lecturing me about financial strategy, might have been amusing under different circumstances. You're right about one thing, I said, stepping around him toward the exit. I do prefer conservative, ethical financial management over impulsive decisions based on personal desire. It's a principle that has served my family's bank quite well. For 3 generations. He blinked, processing my words with visible confusion. Your family's bank? What are you talking about? I paused at the door, turning back to face him. Atlantic Meridian Financial. Founded by my grandfather as Meridian Trust Bank. Surely in 15 years of marriage you bothered to learn something about my family history. Comprehension dawned slowly across his features, followed by disbelief. This is your family's bank? You're saying you own Atlantic Meridian? I'm the majority shareholder and sit on the board of directors. A fact I never concealed, though you evidently never found it important enough to inquire about. But you left banking when we married, he protested. You said you wanted to focus on our home, on supporting my career. I stepped back from daily operations, I corrected. I never relinquished my ownership or governance role. Again, something you never asked about because you assumed my professional identity had been subsumed by my role as your wife. He stood frozen, visibly reassessing. 15 years of assumptions in light of this revelation. I could almost see the calculations running behind his eyes. The implications for his financial strategy, his divorce planning, his future with Sophia. So, the delays with the mortgage, he began. Banking bureaucracy can be so tedious, I replied with a small smile. Especially when institutions are in acquisition discussions. His eyes widened. Atlantic Meridian is acquiring Continental? That would be confidential information, Daniel. But as you've recently discovered, timing in real estate can be critical. Properties don't always close as expected. I pushed open the door, stepping into the evening air. Your attorney has contacted Claire Bennett to arrange a meeting. I suggest you use that opportunity to present a realistic settlement proposal, one that acknowledges your fiduciary violations of our marriage contract. Evie, wait, he called, following me outside. We need to discuss this further. If your family controls Atlantic Meridian, that significantly changes our financial picture. No, Daniel, I corrected him. It changes your financial picture. My position has always been exactly what it is. You simply never bothered to see it. I walked to my waiting car, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, the power dynamic between us irrevocably altered. The following morning, as I prepared for the day in my increasingly personalized penthouse, my phone rang with a call from Claire. Daniel's attorney canceled our meeting, she reported. They've requested a brief postponement to reassess parameters. I smiled, picturing Daniel's frantic conversation with Thomas Blackwell after discovering my connection to Atlantic Meridian. Their entire strategy would need recalibration. "Let them stew," I replied. "We're in no rush." Agreed. In the meantime, I received a call from Continental Trust's general counsel this morning. Apparently, they've been experiencing some unusual system issues affecting certain mortgage applications, including the one for Unit 1403 at the Westerly. "How unfortunate for them," I remarked. Indeed, the council seemed particularly concerned about potential regulatory complications related to their lending practices. I got the distinct impression they're nervous about something bigger than routine systems problems. "Their anxiety is understandable," I commented. "Regulatory scrutiny can be quite thorough during acquisition reviews." After finishing my call with Claire, I dressed for the day, selecting a vibrant coral suit that would have been unthinkable in my previous life with Daniel. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, reclaimed from the safe in our former home, I studied my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had changed in subtle but profound ways. There was a clarity in her eyes, a confidence in her posture, a certainty of purpose that had been missing before. This wasn't just about responding to betrayal. It was about reclaiming the essence of who I had always been beneath the accommodating facade I'd constructed. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Harold reviewed the Continental proposal. He's on board. Acquisition looking promising for Monday approval. Another piece falling into place. I replied with a simple, "Excellent. See you at 9. As I drove to the bank, I considered the board meeting ahead and the acquisition we would likely approve. Continental Trust wasn't merely a strategic banking expansion, though it certainly made sound business sense. It represented something deeper, my ability to shape circumstances rather than be shaped by them. For too long, I had allowed my identity to be defined in relation to Daniel, his wife, his supporter, his advocate. Even my professional choices had been made with his preferences in mind. The revelation of his betrayal had been painful, but it had also been clarifying. Like a forest fire that burns away undergrowth to allow for new growth, this upheaval was creating space for renewal. In my office, I found a delivery. Waiting, a sleek, leather-bound portfolio from Alessandra, the interior designer. Inside were finalized plans for my penthouse, including custom pieces she had sourced from artisans around the world. The spaces she had created were sophisticated yet comfortable, elegant yet distinctly personal. On the last page was a handwritten note. "Creating spaces that reflect who we truly are is the ultimate act of self-possession. Your new home will tell your story, not as someone's wife, but as yourself." Alessandra Ferrer. I traced my fingers over the floor plans, feeling a surge of anticipation for this tangible manifestation of my reclaimed identity. This space would be solely mine. Every color, texture, and object selected to please only myself. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Harrington, Mr. Winters is here to see you." I was surprised by the unscheduled visit from our most senior board member. "Please send him in." Harold Winters entered with the measured pace of his 80 years, his tailored suit and bow tie harking back to an earlier banking era. He had been my grandfather's closest friend and staunchest ally during Atlantic Meridian's expansion decades ago. "Evangeline," he greeted me, taking the offered seat across from my desk. "You're looking well. That color suits you." "Thank you, Harold. This is an unexpected pleasure." He nodded, getting straight to the point as was his custom. "I've reviewed the Continental acquisition proposal. Impressive work. Your grandfather would approve of both the timing and the structure." "That means a great deal coming from you," I acknowledged. He studied me for a moment, his gaze shrewd despite his years. "Marcus mentioned you're taking a more active role again. Permanent, I hope." "Yes," I confirmed. "I've realized my place is here, helping to build what my family started." "About damn time," he said bluntly. Banking is in your blood, Evangeline. Always has been. When you stepped back after marrying that lawyer fellow, your grandfather was concerned you were making a mistake. She'll be back, he told me. The best Harringtons always find their way home to banking. I smiled at the memory of my grandfather's certainty. He knew me better than I knew myself. He understood legacy, Harold corrected. Not just the money or the institution, but the responsibility that comes with both. The Harrington name on this bank has always meant something. Integrity, innovation, service. Those values don't disappear because you take a different path for a while. His words resonated deeply. I had never fully abandoned my banking identity, but I had certainly subordinated it to my role as Daniel's wife. The reintegration of those aspects of myself, banker, Harrington, woman, felt like pieces of a puzzle finally fitting together properly. The Continental acquisition is just the beginning, I told him. I have other initiatives planned, expanding our wealth management services, strengthening our ethical lending practices, modernizing our approach to financial protection. Harold nodded approvingly. Good. Banking needs strong ethical leadership now more than ever. Too many institutions chase quarterly profits at the expense of long-term sustainability and client welfare. We discussed the acquisition details for another 20 minutes before Harold rose to leave. At the door, he paused. One more thing, Evangeline. I heard rumors about your personal situation. Nothing specific, just whispers about marital difficulties. He straightened his bow tie, a habitual gesture. Whatever's happening, remember that you come from resilient stock. Harringtons don't break under pressure, they transform it into opportunity. After he departed, I sat reflecting on his words. Resilience had indeed been a family trait, passed down through generations alongside banking acumen and ethical principles. My grandfather had navigated the Great Depression without foreclosing on a single-family farm. My father had rebuilt after a devastating bank fire destroyed our headquarters in the 1970s. My grandmother had temporarily run the bank when my grandfather fell ill, defying banking norms of her era. And now I was transforming personal betrayal into professional renaissance, using my banking knowledge to protect not just myself, but others who might face similar situations. My phone buzzed with a text, not from Daniel this time, but from Sophia Reynolds. My breath caught in surprise as I read, "I know who you are now. We need to talk. It's not what you think." How interesting. Daniel must have shared my revelation about Atlantic Meridian, and Sophia was scrambling to adjust their strategy. The irony wasn't lost on me, the younger woman reaching out directly rather than through her lover. Perhaps she was more pragmatic than Daniel had anticipated. I considered ignoring the message but decided knowledge was power. "What exactly isn't what I think?" I replied. Her response came quickly. "Everything. Daniel isn't who you think he is. Neither am I. Please meet me, for your own protection." A curious approach, positioning herself as concerned for my welfare rather than as the other woman in a typical triangle. I forwarded the exchange to Claire with a brief note. "Thoughts?" Claire's response was immediate and predictable. "Absolutely not." No meeting. This is textbook manipulation. She was probably right. Yet something about Sophia's message niggled at me. The phrasing felt off for someone merely trying to protect her relationship and financial interests. For your own protection. What did she imagine I needed protection from? I already knew about their affair, the diverted funds, the condo purchase. What else could there be? I placed my phone face down on my desk, returning to the acquisition documents. Monday's board meeting would be pivotal for the bank's future trajectory. Whatever game Sophia was playing could wait. Yet as I reviewed financial projections and integration timelines, her words kept resurfacing in my mind. "Daniel isn't who you think he is. Neither am I." Perhaps it was time to find out exactly who they both were. Despite Claire's advice, Sophia's cryptic message lingered in my thoughts throughout the weekend. By Sunday afternoon, as I arranged art, pieces in my nearly completed penthouse, curiosity overrode caution. I texted her, "What specifically do you think I need protection from?" Her response came within minutes. "Not over text. Too risky. Meet me tomorrow, 1 p.m., Riverside Cafe. Come." Alone. The melodrama of her message, "Too risky? Come alone," seemed excessive, yet I couldn't dismiss it entirely. 15 years of marriage to Daniel had taught me to recognize when something was genuinely amiss, and my instincts were signaling caution. I called Claire explaining the situation. Her reaction was predictably disapproving. "Absolutely not," she insisted. "This is a trap. She's trying to manipulate you, create doubt, exploit your natural curiosity, maybe even manufacture sympathy." I considered that, I acknowledged. "But what if there's something we're missing? Some angle we haven't considered?" Claire sighed audibly. "If you're determined to do this, at least take precautions. Meet in a public place with security cameras. Have someone nearby? Not me. Someone they wouldn't recognize. And for God's sake, don't sign anything or make any commitments." "I'll be careful," I promised, "and I'll record the conversation." After ending the call, I contacted Mr. Reeves, the security consultant who had overseen my move. His calm professionalism was exactly what the situation required. "I can be at Riverside Cafe by 12:45 tomorrow," he confirmed after I explained the situation. "I'll secure a table with line of sight to your meeting but won't appear connected to you. If anything seems off, I'll intervene immediately." With security arranged, I turned my attention to Monday morning's board meeting. The Continental Trust acquisition would require careful presentation. While the financial case was solid, acquisitions always carried emotional weight. Jobs would change, leadership would shift, corporate cultures would merge. Addressing these human elements would be crucial for maintaining board support. I worked late into the evening, refining my presentation, until every potential objection had been anticipated and addressed. By the time I finally went to bed, my focus had shifted entirely from Sophia's mysterious message to the strategic future of Atlantic Meridian Financial. Monday morning brought crisp autumn sunshine and a sense of purpose. I dressed with particular care in a tailored navy suit with subtle gold pinstripes, professional but commanding, traditional enough to reassure conservative board members while still distinctly modern. The boardroom was already filled when I arrived, conversations pausing momentarily as board members registered my presence. In previous years, my attendance had been sporadic enough to cause subtle surprise. Now, there was a different energy, acknowledgement, respect, perhaps even anticipation. Marcus caught my eye with a slight nod as I took my seat. The signal was clear. Everything was proceeding as planned. Harold Winters called the meeting to order precisely at 9 a.m., moving efficiently through routine matters before turning to the main agenda item. Before we proceed to the Continental Trust acquisition proposal, I believe Ms. Harrington has some introductory remarks. I stood, surveying the faces around the table. Men and women who collectively guided an institution managing billions in assets, an institution my family had built from a single branch nearly a century ago. Thank you, Harold. As you all know, Atlantic Meridian has historically grown through strategic acquisition at key market inflection points. My grandfather acquired First Regional during the banking crisis of the 1970s. My father integrated Western State Trust during the technology transformation of the 1990s. Each move expanded our capabilities while remaining true to our core values. I activated the presentation screen, displaying a timeline of Atlantic Meridian's growth alongside economic indicators. Continental Trust represents a similar opportunity. Their branch network complements our existing footprint without significant overlap. Their wealth management division brings expertise in sectors where we've historically been underdeveloped, and their current leadership challenges create a favorable acquisition environment. For the next 30 minutes, I guided the board through the proposal, addressing questions about integration costs, technology compatibility, and regulatory hurdles. The discussion was thorough, but primarily supportive. Marcus had done excellent preparatory work with key stakeholders. When the final vote came, the acquisition was approved unanimously. Harold Winters, ever the formal chairman, asked if there was any other business. "Just one item," I said, remaining standing. "I'd like to formally announce my return to active executive duties as Chief Strategy Officer, effective immediately." This generated more discussion than the acquisition itself. Not opposition, but clarification about my role relative to Marcus and other executives. I addressed each question directly, emphasizing that my return wasn't about displacing current leadership but strengthening our collective capabilities. "Marcus has my complete confidence as CEO," I concluded. "My role will focus on strategic initiatives, particularly in areas where banking intersects with client protection and ethical governance." By meeting's end, my dual victories, the acquisition approval and my formal executive return, had established a new reality. I was no longer merely the founder's granddaughter with a courtesy board seat. I was Evangeline Harrington, Chief Strategy Officer and architect of Atlantic Meridian's next chapter. As board members filtered out, Marcus approached with a satisfied smile. "Congratulations! The board hasn't been this energized in years." "They recognize good strategy," I replied. "The Continental acquisition makes sense for everyone." "Everyone?" "Except certain mortgage applicants at the Westerly," he noted with subtle humor. "Speaking of which, our legal department has already contacted Continental about acquisition protocols. All pending high-value approvals are temporarily frozen during review." "Banking procedures can be so tedious," I remarked innocently. Back in my office, I began preparation for my meeting with Sophia. If her cryptic messages were merely manipulation, I needed to be prepared to end the conversation quickly. If there was genuine substance, I needed to capture every detail. At 12:30, I left for Riverside Cafe, a sophisticated lunch spot overlooking the water. The location was purposeful, public enough for safety, upscale enough to minimize disruption, and neutral territory away from both our social circles. Mr. Reeves had texted confirmation of his position as I arrived. I spotted him at a corner table, apparently absorbed in laptop work, but strategically placed to observe the entire cafe. I selected a table with clear sightlines to both entrances and activated the recording app on my phone just as Sophia entered, precisely at 1 p.m. In person, she was even more striking than in photographs, tall and slender with expertly highlighted blonde hair and the polished appearance of someone who invested significantly in their presentation. She wore a conservative beige dress that seemed deliberately chosen to convey seriousness rather than attract attention. Her eyes found mine immediately, recognition flickering across her features. She approached with confident strides that belied the gravity of her text messages. "Mrs. Chen," she greeted me formally. "Thank you for meeting me." "Ms. Reynolds," I replied, equally formal. "Please sit." She slid into the chair across from me, placing her designer handbag carefully on the table, a position that would allow quick access to its contents. The gesture triggered a warning note in my mind. "I'll be direct," I began before she could speak. "You claimed Daniel isn't who I think he is, and neither are you. That I need protection. From what exactly?" She glanced around before leaning forward slightly. "Before I explain, I need to know something. How much do you know about your husband's legal work over the past 5 years?" The question wasn't what I'd expected. He specializes in financial institutional law, mergers, acquisitions, regulatory, compliance. She nodded. "The public version, yes. but his client list includes several entities under federal investigation for money laundering and securities fraud. I kept my expression neutral despite my surprise. Many lawyers represent clients with legal challenges. That's their job. Not like this, she countered, lowering her voice further. I'm not Daniel's girlfriend, Mrs. Chen. I'm an agent with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. The claim was so unexpected that for a moment I simply stared at her. FinCEN was the Treasury Department's bureau responsible for investigating financial crimes, a serious federal agency not typically involved in marital disputes. You expect me to believe you're an undercover federal agent? I asked skeptically, rather than the woman my husband has been spending nights with at the Westerly? I understand your disbelief, she acknowledged. But yes, I've been working undercover at Daniel's firm for 11 months, gathering evidence on a network of lawyers facilitating offshore transactions for sanctioned entities. Daniel is a key figure in that network. She reached slowly into her handbag, a movement I watched carefully, and withdrew what appeared to be a credentials wallet. She opened it discreetly under the table's edge, revealing a federal badge and identification card. The identification appeared authentic, but I remained skeptical. Even if you are a federal agent, that doesn't explain the condo purchased with my money or the jewelry I found with your name on it. She closed the credential wallet and returned it to her bag. The condo was necessary for the operation. As for your money, Daniel transferred those funds without my knowledge or consent. When I discovered the source, I immediately reported it to my superiors, but we couldn't intervene without compromising the larger investigation. The pendant? I pressed. Theater, she replied simply. Props to maintain my cover as Daniel's mistress. I've never spent a night at the Westerly with your husband, Mrs. Chen. The unit is used for meetings with other targets and surveillance operations. My mind raced, reassessing weeks of assumptions in light of this startling new information. If Sophia was telling the truth, the narrative I'd constructed was fundamentally flawed. But federal agents were trained in deception. This could simply be an elaborate manipulation. Why tell me this now? I asked. If there's an ongoing federal investigation, you're compromising it by revealing your identity. Because things have accelerated, she explained. Daniel and his associates are liquidating assets and preparing to move substantial funds offshore. The $247,000 he took from your joint account was just the beginning. Based on documents I've accessed, he's prepared paperwork to borrow against or liquidate several major assets you hold jointly. This aligned with concerns Claire had already raised about Daniel potentially accessing our other shared resources. Still, I needed verification before accepting such extraordinary claims. If you're truly a federal agent investigating my husband, you'll have no objection to my counsel confirming your identity, I stated. I expected that request, she acknowledged. My supervisor has authorized limited verification through secure channels. You can have your attorney contact Assistant Director James Montgomery at our headquarters. I've left his contact information at the bottom of your water glass. I glanced down to see a small folded paper adhered to the underside of my glass, a method of information transfer straight from espionage tradecraft. You're being theatrical, I observed. I'm being cautious, she corrected. Daniel and his associates have connections throughout this city, including in law enforcement. We believe at least 2 officers in the Financial Crimes Division of the EO Police Department are compromised. The waitress approached, and our conversation paused as we ordered, a choreographed normalcy that felt increasingly absurd given the subject matter. When we were alone again, I asked the question foremost. In my mind, what exactly has Daniel done? His firm has created a complex network of shell companies and offshore accounts to move money for several sanctioned entities, including organizations linked to international arms dealers and drug cartels. The transactions are disguised as legitimate business investments, often in real estate and development projects. The description was specific enough to be credible, yet vague enough to be difficult to immediately verify. A perfect balance for either an honest federal agent with operational security concerns or a skilled manipulator. And how does this involve me? I asked, beyond the money he took from our account. In 3 significant ways, Sophia replied. First, as his spouse, some of your joint assets could potentially be seized if he's convicted of financial crimes. Second, he's been using your social connections, charity boards, foundation work, to legitimize relationships with certain high-net-worth individuals who are actually sources of illicit funds. She paused before continuing. And third, most concerning to us, he's recently been making inquiries about Atlantic Meridian Financial's compliance procedures and transaction monitoring systems. This last point sent a chill through me. If Daniel was involved in money laundering, Atlantic Meridian would be an attractive target. A regional bank large enough to handle significant transactions, but small enough to potentially have exploitable compliance gaps. I need to verify your identity before this conversation goes any further, I said, reaching for the paper under my glass. And I'll require substantiating evidence for these allegations. Of course, Sophia agreed, but we need to move quickly. Daniel's actions since you left have been erratic. He's accelerated timelines, making calls to offshore contacts, attempting to access additional funds. We believe he's preparing contingency plans, possibly including leaving the country. I studied her as she spoke, looking for signs of deception. Her eye contact was steady, her body language consistent with someone conveying urgent but factual information rather than emotional manipulation. If what you're saying is true, I said carefully, why not simply arrest him now? You claim to have been investigating for 11 months. We're building a case against the entire network, not just Daniel. Premature action would alert his associates and compromise the broader investigation. But his recent behavior has forced us to consider accelerating our timeline. Our food arrived, creating another artificial pause in this extraordinary conversation. I took the opportunity to text Claire under the table. Need urgent verification of federal agent. Details to follow. Let's assume for a moment that everything you've told me is accurate, I said after the waitress departed. What exactly do you want from me? Information and time, she replied. Information about any unusual transactions or inquiries Daniel has made regarding your banking operations. And time to complete our documentation before he moves the remaining assets beyond reach. And in return? Protection of your interests to the extent possible. Separation of your legitimate assets from any potential seizures, and the knowledge that you're helping stop a significant criminal enterprise. The offer was both compelling and concerning. If Sophia was legitimate, cooperation could indeed protect my interests. If she was manipulating me, sharing sensitive, banking information could create serious regulatory and legal issues. I need to consult with my attorney, I said finally, and verify your identity through proper channels. Understandable, she acknowledged, but please move quickly. Based on communications we've intercepted, Daniel and his associates are planning major transactions within the next 72 hours. She slid a business card across the table, blank except for a phone number. This is a secure line. Once you've verified my identity, call this number. The line is monitored 24/7. I pocketed the card, still processing the implications of her claims. If Daniel was indeed involved in money laundering through his legal practice, it would explain certain patterns I'd noticed over the years. His increasingly affluent lifestyle despite modest partnership increases, his inexplicable absences, his growing network of international clients with vague business interests. But it would also mean that my husband of 15 years was not merely an unfaithful spouse, but potentially a criminal facilitating transactions for dangerous international entities. One more thing, Sophia added as we prepared to leave. Don't return to your former home unaccompanied, even to collect additional belongings. We have reason to believe Daniel has installed surveillance equipment since your departure. This specific warning, coupled with her knowledge of my move, lent additional credibility to her claims. Such details would be difficult to fabricate, convincingly. I'll take that under advisement, I replied non-committally. We parted outside the cafe with the artificial cordiality of business acquaintances, agreeing to communicate further after I'd completed my verification process. Mr. Reeves approached as Sophia disappeared around the corner. All clear? For now, I replied. Did you hear the conversation? He nodded. Most of it. Quite a remarkable claim she's making. Indeed, and remarkably difficult to disprove. Immediately. Would you like me to follow her? He offered. I considered this briefly but shook my head. No. If she's legitimate, we'd be interfering with a federal investigation. If she's not, I'll discover that through official channels. Back at the bank, I called Claire from my office's secure line, explaining Sophia's astonishing claims and the verification contact she had provided. This is either an elaborate con or a bombshell, Claire observed. I'll contact this Assistant Director Montgomery immediately through official channels, not the number she provided. If she's legitimate, FinCEN will confirm her status, though they likely won't share operational details. How long will verification take? I asked. Hard to say with federal agencies. Hours, possibly days. Sophia claimed we only have 72 hours before Daniel moves significant assets. Claire's tone sharpened. That's a classic pressure tactic, Evie. Creating artificial urgency to force hasty decisions. Don't let it cloud your judgment. I won't, I assured her. But if there's any truth to her allegations, we need to move quickly to protect the bank as well as my personal assets. After hanging up, I sat at my desk, mind racing with implications. The possibility that Daniel was involved in money laundering created new dimensions to our marital breakdown, dimensions with potential criminal and regulatory consequences far beyond a typical divorce. I needed more information before making any decisions, but I also needed to take precautionary measures. I picked up my phone and called Marcus. I need a comprehensive review of all transactions linked to Daniel's law firm or its major clients over the past 5 years, I told him when he answered, and enhanced monitoring of any current or pending transactions. That's a significant undertaking, he noted, concern evident in his voice. May I ask why? I've received information suggesting potential financial irregularities. It may be nothing, but I want to be certain. Does this relate to your personal situation? He asked carefully. Potentially, but my concern is protecting the bank from any exposure. After ending the call, I turned to my computer and began my own research, searching for connections between Daniel's known clients and any regulatory actions or investigations. Most of his client list was public information through court filings and the firm's website, providing a starting point. 3 hours of intensive research revealed several concerning patterns. 4 of Daniel's international clients had been mentioned in financial news stories about suspicious transaction reports. 2 development companies he represented had been linked to property deals with inflated valuations typical of money laundering schemes. And 1 investment group had subsidiaries in jurisdictions known for banking secrecy and minimal regulatory oversight. None of this proved Sophia's allegations, but it created a troubling mosaic of potential connections that warranted further investigation. By evening, Claire called with an update. I've confirmed that a Sophia Reynolds is indeed employed by FinCEN, she reported. However, they won't confirm or deny any operational details, including whether she's working undercover or investigating your husband. That's something, at least, I replied. What's your assessment? Her federal employment is verified, but that doesn't guarantee everything else she told you is accurate. Federal agents can operate under various covers and pretexts. The jewelry, the condo, those physical elements don't align neatly with typical undercover operations. Unless they were manufactured specifically to create a convincing mistress narrative, I countered. Possible, Claire acknowledged, but elaborate. The simpler explanation remains that she's Daniel's actual girlfriend, who also happens to work for FinCEN, and is now trying to leverage that connection somehow. The assessment was logical, but incomplete. It didn't explain Sophia's specific knowledge of Daniel's alleged offshore activities or her awareness of surveillance in my former home, details that would be difficult to fabricate convincingly. I need more information before making any decisions, I concluded. For now, let's proceed with the divorce filing as planned, but add additional protections regarding potential undisclosed assets or liabilities. After ending the call, I remained in my office, watching darkness fall over the city as I contemplated this unexpected turn of events. Whether Sophia's claims were entirely true, partially accurate, or completely fabricated, one thing was clear. The situation was far more complex than a simple case of marital infidelity and financial betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. We need to talk. Not about us, about Sophia. She's not who you think she is. The irony of his message mirroring Sophia's earlier warning wasn't lost on me. Both claimed the other was misrepresenting themselves. Both wanted my cooperation. Both presented compelling yet incompletely verifiable narratives. The question was, which version of reality would ultimately prove true? And how could I protect myself, my assets, and my bank while navigating this treacherous uncertainty? As I gathered my belongings to leave for the day, Marcus appeared in my doorway with a grim expression. You asked for monitoring of transactions linked to Daniel's firm, he said without preamble. We've found something you need to see immediately. He placed a file folder on my desk and opened it to reveal a transaction report. This wire transfer was attempted 30 minutes ago. $5 million from an overseas account linked to one of Daniel's clients, routing through 3 separate entities before attempting to enter our system through a dormant business account. I studied the transaction details, noting the complex routing structure clearly designed to obscure the origin of the funds. Was it processed? No. Our enhanced monitoring flagged it for review, and our compliance team rejected it based on incomplete documentation. But it's concerning that someone tried to route such a large sum through our bank, using such an obviously structured approach. Especially given the timing, I noted. Just days after I returned to active management and began asking questions about Daniel's connections to the bank. Marcus nodded gravely. Exactly. This doesn't appear to be coincidental. I stared at the transaction details, Sophia's warnings echoing in my mind. If she was telling the truth, this could be part of the money laundering operation she had described, a test of our systems, or an attempt to move funds before authorities closed in. Implement maximum security protocols on all international transfers, I instructed. Any transaction over $1 million requires executive review until further notice. And I want a complete audit of any account connected to Daniel's firm, his clients, or their subsidiaries. Consider it done, Marcus assured me. Should we notify regulators about this attempted transaction? I considered the implications carefully. Filing a suspicious activity report was the proper banking procedure, but it would create an official record that could potentially alert Daniel if he had connections within regulatory agencies, as Sophia had suggested. Follow standard protocols, I decided finally, but mark the SAR for senior review at FinCEN. This would ensure the report reached appropriate authorities, while potentially bringing it to the attention of Sophia's department if her claims were legitimate. As Marcus departed with his instructions, I sat back in my chair, the weight of the situation settling over me. What had begun as a personal betrayal was expanding into potential criminal territory with implications far beyond my marriage. I picked up my phone and texted Sophia's secure number. Verification partially confirmed. Recent banking activity suggests your concerns may have merit. Meeting tomorrow morning, 7 a.m., my office at Atlantic Meridian. Come through the executive entrance. Her response was immediate. We'll be there. Come directly. Don't return home first. Destroy this message after reading. The cloak and dagger instructions would have seemed melodramatic just days ago. Now, with attempted suspicious transactions appearing in my bank systems, they carried a weight of potential legitimacy that couldn't be dismissed. I deleted our message exchange, locked my office, and headed to my penthouse, hyper-aware of my surroundings in a way I'd never been before. The city streets no longer looked familiar and safe, but filled with potential surveillance and hidden threats. In my new home, surrounded by my carefully selected furnishings and art, I should have felt secure. Instead, I found myself checking windows and doors, double verifying the security system, examining my phone for signs of tampering. This was the true cost of betrayal beyond the emotional pain, the destruction of safety, the erosion of certainty, the constant questioning of what was real and what was manipulation. As I prepared for bed, I found myself wondering which was worse: discovering your husband was having an affair and stealing your money, or learning he might be involved in international financial crimes that could destroy everything you'd built. Either way, one thing was becoming increasingly clear. The life I had known was gone, and whatever emerged from this chaos would bear little resemblance to what had come before. The only question was whether I would be architect or victim of what came next. Dawn broke, with steely gray light filtering through my penthouse windows. I had slept fitfully, my dreams filled with fragmented images of Daniel, Sophia, and shadowy figures moving money through elaborate mazes of accounts and properties. I rose early, selecting a striking crimson suit that projected both authority and confidence, armor for the confrontations ahead. Today would bring answers, one way or another. At 6:30 a.m., I arrived at the bank through the underground parking garage, avoiding the main entrance as a precaution. The building was largely empty at this hour, just security personnel and early arriving support staff preparing for the day. In my office, I reviewed the additional reports Marcus had sent overnight, a comprehensive analysis of accounts and transactions potentially connected to Daniel's firm or clients. The patterns were concerning: structured transactions just below, reporting thresholds, international transfers through complex routing arrangements, property deals with questionable valuations. None definitely illegal in isolation, but collectively painting a picture of potential money laundering activities. At precisely 7 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message from security. Ms. Reynolds has arrived at the executive entrance. Please escort her up, I replied. Sophia arrived moments later, dressed in a conservative pantsuit with her hair pulled back severely. Nothing like the stylish paralegal persona she had maintained at Daniel's firm. The transformation was striking, lending credibility to her claims of an undercover role. Thank you for meeting me, she said, taking the seat I indicated. Have you verified my identity? Partially, I confirmed. FinCEN acknowledges your employment but won't confirm operational details. She nodded, unsurprised. Standard protocol. What convinced you to meet again? I slid the transaction report across my desk. This attempted wire transfer yesterday. $5 million through structured routing that attempted to utilize our bank. The timing seems significant. She reviewed the document quickly, her expression hardening. They're accelerating their timeline. This is consistent with communications we've intercepted suggesting a major movement of assets this week. Who exactly is they? I pressed. You've made serious allegations about my husband, but I need specifics, not generalities. Sophia hesitated, then reached into her briefcase and withdrew a thumb drive. This contains sanitized case documents, enough to verify the investigation without compromising operational security. Names of other targets are redacted, but Daniel's involvement is clear. I accepted the drive cautiously. I'll need my security team to verify this isn't malware before accessing it. Of course, she agreed readily. The files are encrypted. Password is Meridian 1924, your grandfather's founding year. The specific reference to my family history, information, not readily available to the public, was another small piece supporting her credibility. How do you know about my grandfather's bank? I asked. Background research is fundamental to any federal investigation, she replied. We compile comprehensive profiles on all significant connections to primary targets. Your banking heritage became particularly relevant once we discovered Daniel's interest in your family's institution. What exactly does Daniel want with Atlantic Meridian? Based on communications we've monitored, his network needs a banking partner with sufficient size to handle their transaction volume but with fewer controls than major national institutions. Your recent absence from active management created what they perceived as an opportunity, a bank with a leadership gap they might exploit. The statement aligned with what I already knew and suspected, lending it credibility. If Daniel believed I was completely disconnected from bank operations, he might indeed have seen Atlantic Meridian as a potential conduit for questionable transactions. What happens next? I asked. In your investigation? We're preparing for coordinated enforcement, actions against multiple targets, including your husband, search warrants, asset freezes, arrests, likely within the next 48 hours. The timeline was jarring despite my suspicions. And you're telling me this because… 3 reasons, Sophia answered directly. First, to protect legitimate bank operations from disruption. Second, to ensure your personal assets aren't unnecessarily entangled in seizure actions. And third, because we need your cooperation for one final piece of evidence. What kind of cooperation? Daniel has been trying desperately to reach you. We believe he wants to move additional funds or establish new accounts to protect assets from discovery. If you were to meet with him, with proper surveillance in place. I understood immediately. You want me to wear a wire. More sophisticated than that, but essentially yes. A monitored conversation could provide direct evidence of his knowledge and intent, crucial elements for prosecution. That's a significant request, I observed, acting as an informant against my own husband. It is, she acknowledged, and entirely voluntary. We can proceed without your assistance, but the case would be stronger with direct evidence of his statements to you. The request required careful consideration. If Sophia was legitimate, cooperation could indeed protect my interests while helping bring a criminal to justice. If she wasn't, I could be participating in an elaborate setup with unknown consequences. I need to review your documentation first, I decided, and consult with my attorney. Legal privilege must be maintained regardless of Daniel's alleged activities. Understood. We can work with your counsel to ensure appropriate protections. She stood to leave. One more thing. We believe Daniel may make a significant move today after his meeting with Continental Trust executives regarding the mortgage application for the Westerly property. That meeting won't be taking place, I informed her. The Continental acquisition was approved yesterday. All high-value pending approvals are frozen during transition. Satisfaction flickered briefly across her features. That will disrupt their timeline considerably. Well done. After Sophia departed, I immediately called our head of cybersecurity to examine the thumb drive. While waiting for clearance to access its contents, I updated Claire on the meeting and Sophia's extraordinary request. Wearing a wire is absolutely out of the question, Claire insisted, even if she's legitimate, which remains only partially. Verified. Participating in evidence gathering creates significant legal exposure for you. I haven't agreed to anything, I assured her. But I need to know if Daniel is actually involved in criminal activities. The implications for the divorce settlement and for the bank are substantial. There are other ways to protect your interests, Claire countered. Let the federal authorities handle their investigation while we focus on securing your position, legally. By mid-morning, Cybersecurity had verified the thumb drive contained encrypted documents rather than malware. Accessing them revealed a carefully redacted case file that nonetheless painted a disturbing picture. Daniel had apparently been facilitating international transactions for various entities under sanction or investigation, using his legitimate legal practice as cover. The documentation included transcripts of intercepted communications, transaction records, and surveillance reports, all suggesting Daniel's involvement in a sophisticated money laundering operation spanning multiple countries and jurisdictions. Most disturbingly, recent communications indicated increasing interest in Atlantic Meridian as a potential banking channel for their operations, interest that coincided with my stepping back from active management. The evidence was compelling, but still didn't conclusively prove Sophia's identity or the legitimacy of the investigation. Federal case files could be fabricated, especially by someone with inside knowledge of law enforcement procedures. My phone rang. Daniel again. After days of ignoring his calls, I decided to answer, curious what approach he would take. Evie. Finally, he began, relief evident in his voice. We need to talk urgently. Not about us, about Sophia Reynolds. What about her? I asked neutrally. She's not who she claims to be, he insisted. She's been manipulating situations, accessing confidential files, asking suspicious questions around the firm. I believe she may be working for a competitor, or possibly even regulatory authorities. The irony of his warning, essentially confirming Sophia's role while framing it as something suspicious, was almost amusing. How concerning, I replied noncommittally. Have you reported these suspicions? It's complicated, he hedged. I need to show you some documentation first. Can we meet? Today, preferably. The request aligned perfectly with Sophia's prediction that he would seek a meeting, another point in favor of her credibility. I suppose that could be arranged, I said carefully. When and where? Our house, he suggested immediately. It's private, and I have the documents there. Sophia had specifically warned against returning to our former home due to potential surveillance. Another verification point. I prefer neutral territory, I countered. The Edison Hotel lobby at 4 p.m. He hesitated before agreeing. Fine, but come alone. This is sensitive. After ending the call, I contacted Claire to inform her of the meeting. Her disapproval was immediate and emphatic. Don't go, she advised. Firmly. This has all the hallmarks of manipulation. He's trying to control the narrative before authorities potentially move against him. I'll be in a public place, I reminded her. The Edison lobby has security and cameras. I'm not agreeing to wear a wire or participate in the investigation. I'm simply gathering information for our divorce proceedings. Though reluctant, Claire eventually acknowledged I was within my rights to meet Daniel. At least have Mr. Reeves nearby, she insisted, and record the conversation yourself for our purposes, regardless of any federal interest. I agreed to these reasonable precautions before turning my attention back to bank matters. The Continental acquisition was proceeding rapidly, with integration teams already beginning their work. This occupied much of my day, providing welcome focus amid the personal chaos. At 3:30 p.m., I left for the Edison Hotel, having arranged for Mr. Reeves to position himself discreetly in the lobby beforehand. I wore a tailored black suit, conservative and unmemorable, with my grandmother's pearls as my only adornment. Daniel was already waiting when I arrived, occupying a corner seating area partially screened by decorative plants. He stood as I approached, his expression a careful mask of concerned professionalism. Thank you for coming, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. I know things have been difficult. That's one interpretation, I replied coolly. You mentioned documentation regarding Sophia Reynolds? He noted my businesslike tone with a flicker of disappointment before reaching for his briefcase. Yes, I've been conducting my own investigation after noticing inconsistencies in her background and behavior. He withdrew a folder and opened it to reveal photographs of Sophia entering what appeared to be a federal building, meeting with individuals in various locations, and working at a computer with documents visible on the screen. She's not a paralegal, Daniel stated flatly. Or at least not just a paralegal. I believe she's gathering information about our firm for some kind of investigation. That would be concerning, I acknowledged, studying the photos. What kind of investigation do you suspect? He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Some of our international clients operate in complex regulatory environments. Their compliance requirements can be challenging. Sophia has shown particular interest in those client files. Are you suggesting these clients might not be fully compliant with regulations? I asked innocently. All businesses have compliance challenges, he replied evasively. Part of our job as counsel is navigating those challenges within legal frameworks. Of course, I agreed. So your concern is that Sophia might misinterpret these legitimate legal services? Exactly, he said, relief evident in his expression. Regulatory agencies sometimes take aggressive positions on international transactions. An incomplete understanding could create serious problems for the firm and our clients. And for you personally? His eyes narrowed slightly. My work is always within legal boundaries, Evie, but aggressive prosecution can damage reputations regardless of ultimate outcomes. The careful phrasing was telling. Not a direct denial of wrongdoing, but a concern about perception and consequences. What does this have to do with me? I asked directly. Or the money you transferred to Sophia for the Westerly property? His expression tightened. That's a separate matter. The property is a legitimate investment opportunity. The transfer was poorly handled, I admit, but the intention was sound. An investment in whose name? I pressed. Initially Sophia's, for specific legal reasons related to the development contract. The arrangement would have been revealed and restructured once completed. More careful evasions rather than direct falsehoods, a lawyer's approach to deception. And now? I asked. With the Continental acquisition freezing the mortgage approval? Surprise flickered across his features. How did you know about that? I have my sources, I replied. Just as you apparently have yours regarding Sophia. He studied me with newfound wariness. You've changed, Evie. There's an edge to you I don't recognize. Not changed, I corrected. Revealed. There's a difference. Daniel leaned forward, abandoning the pretense of discussing Sophia. What do you want? To finalize this situation between us? Name your terms. The directness was refreshing after so much manipulation. Complete financial transparency. Full accounting of all assets, including those you may consider separate from our marriage. Resignation from any joint boards or foundations where we both serve. And no contact after settlement beyond what's legally required. That's comprehensive, he noted, calculating behind his eyes. And in return? Discretion regarding certain aspects of your professional activities to the extent legally permissible. His expression sharpened with interest. Meaning? Meaning our divorce proceedings needn't include speculation about your clients or professional practices beyond what directly impacts our marital assets. He considered this carefully. And Atlantic Meridian's acquisition of Continental Trust? That's an unfortunate coincidence affecting my investment property. Banking acquisitions follow their own logic, I replied neutrally. Perhaps your legal expertise failed to identify this particular timing risk. A tense silence stretched between us as he processed the implicit message. I knew more than he had assumed and was offering limited protection in exchange for a clean separation. I'll have my attorney contact Claire tomorrow with financial disclosures, he finally said. Comprehensive ones. I look forward to reviewing them, I replied, standing to signal the meeting's conclusion. One more thing. I'll be sending movers for the remainder of my personal items tomorrow morning. Please ensure the house is accessible. Of course, he agreed, rising as well. Evie, for what it's worth, I did love you, in my way. I met his gaze steadily. Your way was insufficient. Goodbye, Daniel. As I walked away, a profound sense of closure settled over me. Whether Sophia's allegations proved entirely true or not, I had seen enough of Daniel's character through his own words and actions to know our marriage was irreparable. More importantly, I had reclaimed my identity and power separate from him. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.